My name's Rob Altman, and today I'll be showing you how to build a wooden horse. Three materials I like to use are 2x4, 3/4 inch birch plywood, and 1/2 inch birch plywood. The first thing I want to do is cut the legs using the 2x4s. I'm going to set the bevel at 7 degrees and the tilt at 19, and then make my first cut. All of the legs will be using the same compound miter. You want to place the same cut on the top and the bottom of all the legs first. So I set a stop off to make sure everything is the same. After you cut the first one, slide the next one over. Make sure there's not a lot of junk on there. Proceed to cut the second one. That way the cuts on the top and the bottom are the same. That's a 19-degree tilt, 7-degree bevel. So once you cut the two pieces together, you need to, what I usually do is I like to stand them up like this, just so I can figure out what the top and what the bottom is. You want the horse to taper out from the center. So from top to bottom, you're swinging out away from the center of the horse. If you flip this over, it's tilting into the center. That would make for a bad horse. It wouldn't support the ends as well. So the fact that it's tilting away from the center gives it that pressure that you want. Once you determine the bottoms from the top, I just like to put a little line down like this for my next cut. We're going to want the top piece to actually be straight through, so this angle has to fit that profile. So they will be considered rights and lefts, or lefts and rights. So to make the next set of cuts, I built this jig. It's got a 20-degree angle on it. And over here I left a little bit of a lip so it doesn't cut the stud to a point. It leaves a little bit of a lip on the top. So I set my saw, my bevel back to 0, my tilt back to 0. I have a spot where I screw this in down to the table to secure it or clamp it. Again, this is just a jig I made out of 3/4 inch plywood. I leave all my settings on here so I know. So for the bottom and the top of the legs, I have a 7-degree bevel and a 19-degree tilt. This is set at 20 degrees with a little bit of a lip. So now that this is secured into place, my saw is set back to square. I basically made the marks on here how I want them cut. This is going to go against the lip for my first cut. So I'm going to slide this on. I like to use a clamp even though I use my hands. Clamp it tight. Do not get your hands too close to the blade. This is for someone who's comfortable around the blade and knows what they're doing. A little bit of materials left. I can just run the saw back through it. That is one side. So this side is cut. This is the other side, which will match up for the left and the right. This will not cut this way, so this one needs to get flipped to produce the same angle. I push it against this little lip. Clamp it. Cut. There you go. Here's a picture of how the jig looks straight on, just so you can kind of see. This is after the cut, obviously. But I'm using this fence to create the steep cut that I need to, since the saw will not bevel to that type of degree. So here's your left and right, sitting pretty good. Again, this will be the outside of the horse. This will be towards the center. You want your legs to taper out from the horse. Next, I'll be cutting the top rail. I'll be using 3/4 birch plywood, 2 layers. I'm finishing my rail at 3 3/4 by 24. The reason for that is that's just the size horse that I need, and I've used these before and they're just great. Low horses, you can put your material down low, you can work all around, and it's enough off the floor that you can get around everywhere. So instead of cutting it exactly at 3 3/4, I'm going to be cutting a little heavier and a little longer. I like to nail it together and then recut it so everything is super smooth and square. No wedges hanging over, everything's perfectly cut. So I'm going to be gluing these two pieces together. Generally there's an outside and inside to the plywood. I generally glue the two insides together. Just putting a quick bead around. Squish and go around, get it all good. And again, they don't have to be too exact because we're going to cut these down widthwise and lengthwise after the fact. Make sure when you put your staples in, you leave enough room so when you cut, you're not cutting into your staples. So originally when I put these together, I cut these pieces at 4 inches wide, about a 1/4 inch wider than what I want. So that way when I come to the saw, the first cut I'll set at 3 7/8, take basically about an 1/8 inch off. When I go to flip the piece over, rather around, I will take another 1/8 off and set this final width at 3 3/4. When I bring the piece back to the miter saw, I like to take a little bit off on one side, square it. Once I cut one side square, I mark it to length. I like to use a square just so I have a line instead of a dash. Set the blade where I want it. Put a stop up. Use some clamps to hold it. This is because I'm doing multiple runs of this. I'm not just doing one. I'm doing 6 or 10 or however many. And then cut it to length. Once we have our top rail cut, as all the pieces, I like to take a sanding block. Just give it a light chamfer everywhere, so nothing sharp. Good to go. So now we want to determine the placement of the leg on the top rail so that we can draw everything out so that when we're ready to nail it together, everything is nicely set up. We have all our marks, put our glue on, and nail everything together. So to figure out the placement of the leg to the top rail, again, making sure that the bottom of the leg does not come past the end of the top rail, which would become a tripping hazard. I take a framing square, lay my top rail inside, take the leg for that appropriate side, keeping it flush with the top, parallel, and then take another square, hold it vertical, and slide the leg over until this point just about touches. I like to leave about 1/8 just for a cushion. When I do that, I determine that my length from the end to the inside point of the leg is 1.5 inches. So what I do next is measure 1.5 inches from each end. Using my combination square, put a line through, another line, Now, from the original bevel that we cut the leg, we had a tilt of 19 and a bevel of 7 degrees. I'm going to use my slide bevel, set that to 7 degrees, and remember the leg is tapering outwards. So from the top point, which is this mark up here that I made, 1.5 inches in from this top point, I'm going to be beveling outwards so that the leg tapers out from this point. So with that in mind, I'm going to take my T-bevel, which is set at 7 degrees, draw a line. I'm going to flip it so that on this side it tapers out, which is getting smaller from the top to the bottom. The bottom is wider, the bottom is narrower. And I'm going to draw that line. I'm going to flip it over and draw my points. So as you can see, I have a line at 7 degrees on both sides. Next, what I want to do is I want to set my combination square up with about 1/4 inch, and then from the top I want to draw a 1/4 inch line. On top to the line on both sides from the top down. What this is going to do is I have that little lip on top of my leg, and it's going to keep it just off the top surface so that when I go to glue this on, I'm going to be sitting down about a 1/4 inch. You could go flush. The problem is that while we're putting this together, I'm going to first nail it together with thin brad nails, 18 gauge, so that if you need to move it just a little bit in order to get the leg flat, you can. If you put it flush to the top and need to move it a little, it's going to need to be sanded. Your top surface is already super smooth and straight. Why mess with it? Just bring it down a little bit, 1/4 inch, and you're fine. Then I take the legs, put them on where I want them to be, draw a line on both sides. That'll determine where I'm going to put the glue. Take the other side. As long as it's close, mark it, glue, glue. Again, just going to be using a little 18 gauge brad gun just to get them started. So I like how they sit, and then I can nail them with a bigger gauge after the fact. Take a little bit of glue. Move it around a little to get the glue where you want. Use the brad to get it where you want it. Move it around a little more. Put the second brad in to hold it. Your first leg is up. Once the two brads are in each, I like to sand it up, make sure it's super flat. Just in case you need to stretch them out a little bit or move them around, they will with the 18 gauge nail. They're very flexible. Once I determine they look pretty good, I lay it back down. Switch to my 1/4 crown stapler. Put a few of those in. And then for the longer part, I just take my 16 gauge nail, 2-inch. Put a few of those in. If you have a heavy gauge stapler, that takes a 2-inch or 2.5 inch staple, perfect. But I don't have that, so I'm just using some 16 gauge nails and some 1/4 crown staples. All right. What I do next is take the other side, determine which leg is which. Put my marks on. Get my gun ready. I'm just clamping it to a flat table. It makes it a little bit easier to use. A little bit of glue. Get the leg where I want it. Move it around a little. And it will move with the nail anywhere you want it. Place the second nail. Once you have all the brads in, kind of want to set it to make sure it's sitting where you want. As you can see, it's nice and flat. No gaps anywhere. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it. You can, pre-clamp them together, get them where you want, then staple them in. I feel pretty confident that with my lines, they're pretty close and that the brads are in. I'm going to lay it back down. You definitely want to make sure that everything's super flat before you put it together or final nail it. You don't want your horse rocking. You want it to be nice and flat. This is when you're putting it together. That's why if you need to adjust it a little bit, if something's really off, it's only brad nails. Pull them up, pop the 2 brads out, and do it again. It's really not an issue. It's a horse. I build custom furniture, so I build these like I'm building a piece of furniture. It really isn't. It should be simple, put them together, done. So that should be more than enough staples. Another thing is within the top, as I chamfered it, I like to just give the legs a little bit of a chamfer. I usually wait till after, that way I can see that the leg is sitting totally flat. Once you chamfer it, it gives it a little bit of a lip. I just like to take the sharpness off. A little chipping. So the last step is putting the gussets on, but before that we really need to determine the size and the shape of the gusset. So, using the 1/2 inch birch that we talked about earlier, I decided to go with a 4-inch width. So I ripped down a bunch of 4-inch width lengths on the table saw, and then held it on, determined what it was from point to point, and cut heavy. So these are actually a little bit longer. And I took this piece, put a center line down, splitting each half equally. And from there, I determined, holding my steel ruler flush to the bottom of the unit, going from face to face, that I was at 4 5/8. I also decided, just as in the top, being a 1/4 inch down, I wanted to leave an 1/8 inch on each side. I didn't want these to go flush with the leg. They can stay inside just a hair. So now that we know that width is 4 5/8, we need to take an 1/8 and an 1/8, which would be a 1/4 inch, and that would take you down to 4 3/8. Half of that would be 2 3/16. So from there, I make a 2 3/16 inch mark there, and a 2 3/16 inch mark here. Now, there's 2 different ways to get your line from here to here as far as your angle. One is, originally when we cut the leg, we did a 7-degree bevel, which is what determined us to put this line on here at 7 degrees. But we also did a 19-degree tilt, which is the angle from this to here, this angle, 19 degrees. So basically, if you take your slide, your T-bevel, set it to 19 degrees, which is the same as the leg. You can put that on that mark. And draw your 2 lines, beveling outwards. Another way you can do it is put your 1/2 inch gusset, the block, up, tight against the bottom, draw 2 lines. So now that you have a couple lines on here, take your tape measure measure across. You can do it from the 1 if you want to be more accurate. It's about 7.5, maybe a little less. 7 3/8, which would be 7 1/8. So you're going to take that 7 1/8 and split that in half. So that would be 3.5 and 3.5 is 7, and then add a 16th. So 3 9/16. So if you go 3 9/16 and make a mark, 3 9/16 and make a mark, you're dead on. 19 degrees, or you can measure. From there, we're going to take this and cut it on the miter box at 19 degrees. So now that you have your piece properly marked out, you're going to set your bevel to 19 degrees. I'm just going to take a look at the blade, make sure it looks good on the line. I'm going to flip the bevel to the opposite side, 19 degrees. Looking at the line, see how it looks. If you're going to be doing multiples of these, like I will be, you can take your stop, set it up, cut all your rights, then cut all your lefts. For this purpose, I'm just showing you that I'm cutting one. So now that I have my gussets, we can attach them. I'm just going to hold this up just to get some glue lines. Again, nice and flat. Just going to use my brad gun to determine where I want it. Nice and flat to the bottom. Nice lines. Staple gun. And there you go. So there you have it. It's a horse. This is the way I was taught to build it. Gentleman by the name of Tom Milano. Incredible, incredible fabricator. Taught me how to build these. And I hope you like them. They're not, 100% perfect. There might be some imperfections, but they're strong and they will last you a lifetime. We use these to put hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of pounds on. And they always come through. You can make these in any length, height, however you want them. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.